So let us talk a bit more about what process management is. Process management basically allows your program to create and manage sub processes or their own processes. And let me give an example. If you open Firefox, for example, or uh, Windows Explorer, whatever, Windows Edge now it's called, or Chrome, then you're starting a process, and that process is basically your web browser. But then you start opening new tabs. These tabs run as different processes for almost all web browsers. So you are creating new processes by just starting a new tab, right? So how do you allow a program like Firefox or Chrome to start new tabs on your system without basically messing your system up? And that's also the case, for example, when you're running a web server, because if you look at Apache web servers, which basically serves almost all, not all of your www requests, but a large part of your HTTP requests go through Apache web servers. And the way that these web servers work is that you have basically a listener, and when you get a new request, you create a new thread or process, and we will discuss the difference between a thread and process a bit later in the course. You create a new thread. Let me use the correct terminology. You create a new thread, and that thread basically starts operating on to serve this request. So the way that you spawn new things, processes or threads, is basically the whole idea of process management. And if we start looking at how Windows, for example, does process management, you have a syscall to create a process, which can be called from your processes, and that's basically called create process. Quite simple. And it basically starts from a parent process, a new child process. I mean, the original process, your original Firefox, is your parent process, but then the tabs you start opening are your children, or the children of the process, of the main process. Uh, it's actually it looks quite simple because you have just a call that to create a process, but the devil is in the details, and the problem starts when you start looking at the arguments that you pass to this. So the kernel needs to do the following. When you do the syscall, you basically need to create and initialize a PCB, process control block, that we have discussed the last lecture, or in lecture 2. And then create and initialize a new address space for this process, so a part of memory where the process will actually have things running. You need to load the program into the address space, and the program prog here is the first argument that you gave to create process. So you need to create and to load the program prog into the address space. You need to copy arguments args into the memory of the address space, because these arguments that you're passing to your child are probably things that the child will start operating on. And you need to initialize the hardware context to start execution at start. So you need to basically start scheduling that process and the sub process, the child process. And you need to inform the scheduler that the new process is ready to run. And then you also have things such as who controls the I/O, the privileges, the scheduling, and so on. And you also want a way to make sure that your process is actually benign, so it's not malicious. Okay, so you want the syscall to be safe and not to expose the kernel of the syscall of creating the process, and that's basically by making sure that the process is, for example, not trying to access parts of the memory that it should not access, or basically start trying to get control of some hard disk area that it should not access, and so on and so forth. And that results in total that the arguments that are passed are around 10 for create process in Windows, which is quite a lot, and given that each one of them has different permutations, you can easily end up with a few hundred or even a few thousand permutations for just starting a single new process, which is very cumbersome in many ways. But it also has its merits because, well, it's very specific. When you start a process, you can basically specify a lot of things that you cannot specify, for example, for Linux. In Linux, when you start a process the same way that you would do in Windows. Of course, you can do that in Linux, but not the same way that you would do that in Windows, which is basically when you start the process right away.